Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, the Flying Spaghetti Auditor, and today I want to deconstruct or audit a particular Bible story. Today's Bible story is Samson lighting 300 foxes on fire. As a Christian, I was taught that these stories are literally true because they happened in the inerrant, unalterable Bible, which is the Word of God.
We are committed to the Word of God as absolutely true, and we are committed to every phrase and every verse and every chapter and every book as having come from God Himself.
So that's the angle with which we're going to be examining this story today. Our journey begins in Judges 13, where we learn that God has sent the Israelites back into a life of slavery, this time under the rule of the Philistines. I guess the whole Exodus was a big waste of time because God decided they deserved to be slaves after all. You see, He's punishing them because they did evil. Samson's parents are among these slaves. I wonder what evil they did, or maybe they just inherited their punishment from their ancestors. Anyway, one day an angel visits them to tell them they will have a son, despite being childless and barren. Sound familiar? You might remember the same exact thing happening to Abraham and Sarah way back in Genesis. The Bible authors like to recycle plot points, but this time there's a catch. Their son must never eat grapes or cut his hair, because reasons. Time skip. Samson is born and now he's a grown-up. Samson is kind of like the Bible's version of Mr. Incredible, except his kryptonite is haircuts. Chop off his luscious braids and he loses his powers.
You think you can control me with a haircut?
So God is like a monkey paw in this story. I'll grant you super strength, but there's a catch. You know, out of all the contingencies God could have chosen, why did He use haircuts? Maybe a better one would have been, I'll grant you strength as long as you never use it to hurt anyone. But nope. Instead, God continues to give him strength and allows him and helps him kill thousands of innocent people. Kind of like a divinely commissioned serial killer. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Maybe Samson's not actually a grown-up, since he needs mommy and daddy to help him talk to girls. I mean, really? He's too nervous to ask her out, so he needs his parents to help him? Ladies, would you ever date a guy whose mom asked you out for him? His father and mother replied, Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? Why would you want to marry a Philistine when you could just hook up with one of your cousins? That's what your mother and I did. Also, why does it matter if they're uncircumcised? He wants to marry a woman, right? They don't even have penises. I think. Hang on. Let me double check that. But Samson said to his father, Get her for me. She's the right one for me. His parents did not know this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time, they were ruling over Israel. It's all part of God's master plan to free the Israelites from slavery. Except God is the one who put them in chains in the first place, only one chapter ago. I mean, it literally says, the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines. Make up your mind, God. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully over him so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. You know, I've never tried ripping apart a goat with my bare hands, but that doesn't sound easy for a normal person. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Some time later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Ew, I like honey as much as the next bear, but I certainly wouldn't eat it directly out of a rotting corpse laying in the desert sun. And kind of a dick move to not warn your parents where you found it. And it also says he scooped it with his hands. He didn't put it in a jar. So I'm just imagining his parents like licking it out of his... Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast, as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." "Tell us the riddle," they said. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." For 3 days, they could not give the answer. The answer is pretty obvious to us as the reader, but there's no chance anyone else would ever guess this. It's completely unfair. He might as well be asking, "What have I got in my pocket?"
There's no fair. There's no fair.
On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?" Jesus Christ, that escalated quickly. "Tell us the answer or we'll fucking kill you." It's crazy that they'd rather murder a whole bunch of innocent people than just break the wager. Just tell Samson, "Look, we give up and we're not going to give you any clothes, okay? No clothes for you." But nope, they choose murder instead. Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast, and on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to her people. Something doesn't add up here. Okay, Samson's wife asked him the question on the 4th day, and then he's like, "I didn't even tell my parents, and you know I'm a mama's boy, so that's saying a lot." And then she cried for the next 7 days of the feast. But there were only 3 days left because she asked him on the 4th day. It's like the authors didn't even bother to check their math. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Plowed with my heifer. Now that sounds oddly sexual, but what does it actually mean? I checked all other English translations, and most of them use the same exact phrase. The only one that explains the metaphor is voice, which says, "If you hadn't gone behind my back with my wife, you would have never found the answer to this riddle." So if I'm understanding correctly, plowing means to churn or unearth information. A heifer is a young cow. So Samson is calling his new wife a cow? Maybe that was a term of endearment back then, but it certainly hasn't aged well. My favorite translation is GW, which says, "If you hadn't used my cow to plow, you wouldn't know my riddle now." They should make the whole Bible rhyme. It would be a lot more entertaining that way. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully over him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home. Why doesn't Samson just say, "You guys cheated, so I'm not giving you shit"? Instead, he marches over to the next village, murders or at least assaults 30 innocent people, steals whatever random clothes they happen to be wearing to give them as party favors. If he would rather commit mass murder than break the wager, why doesn't he just kill his own party guests? And Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. Later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, "I'm going to my wife's room." But her father would not let him go in. "I was so sure you hated her," he said, "that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." The first thing that stands out to me here is this idea that women are property. And this is a theme throughout the entire Bible. It basically supports this idea that women are a commodity to their father, and then their father gets to decide who he gives or sells her off to, and apparently the father can also take back his daughter after the wedding and marry her off to somebody else. I also like when he compares his two daughters' looks, like, "Just marry my other daughter. She's way prettier than that cow you married earlier."
Tina, you fat lard, come get some honey.
Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." Finally, we understand Samson's motivation for lighting 300 foxes on fire. His father-in-law gave his wife away to his friend. Samson really needs to find better friends. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain, together with the vineyards and olive groves. It's almost hard to visualize what's going on here. So Samson caught 300 foxes and tied them together in pairs by the tail, and then he also tied a lit torch to the tail. His plan, of course, being to burn down all the Philistine crops by setting his fire foxes loose and letting them run through the fields. I have so many questions. I have all the questions, like, how long did it take to catch all these foxes? And where did he find them all? Foxes are solitary animals. They don't hunt in teams. They prefer 1v1, final destination, no items. Come on! Now, I did some research, and according to mass.gov, foxes maintain territories ranging from 2 to 7 square miles. Territories are shared by mated pairs and their immature pups, but are actively defended from non-related foxes. A typical litter size is 4 infants. Let's be as charitable as possible and assume that this area has 6 foxes for every 2 square mile territory, or 3 FM squared. That means Samson had to hunt through at least 100 square miles to find 300 foxes. If you put together a team of fox experts, it would still take forever to find that many foxes. Foxes are not easy to catch either. I mean, Samson had to have built traps and carried them all over Philistia. I mean, when he caught these foxes, did he just throw them into a big bag and sling it over his shoulder like Santa Claus? Or did he use a carriage to transport caged foxes and traps back and forth? Maybe his carriage was pulled by a talking donkey. Who knows?
Shh, quiet, Fox. You're gonna get me in trouble, and I need this job. I am not going back to work for old McDonald. Tell me the E-I-E-I-O. E-I-E-I-No, that's what I said.
Maybe the Philistines had a fox sanctuary where Samson could go in and just take 300 foxes all in one night. But the text clearly says Samson went out and caught 300 foxes. Is it impossible for one man to catch that many foxes all by himself? No, but it would take forever.
Could 2 men alone build the Brooklyn Bridge? Maybe, but it would take forever.
In all the weeks he spent collecting foxes, couldn't he just light the crops on fire himself? Just run through a field with a torch in each hand, lighting it on fire. Or he could have recruited the nice people over at Ashkelon for help if he hadn't have killed them all first. And why did the foxes need to be tied together in pairs anyway? Couldn't he just use 150 foxes and not tie them together? Even that still seems like overkill. Like 50 foxes wouldn't have been enough. It has to be 300.
This is
Let's explore what kind of fox Samson might have been capturing. Among all current and extinct variants, there are 37 species of fox and fox-like canids, 12 of which belong to the genus Vulpes, or true foxes. The most common of these is the red fox, of which there are 47 subspecies. Philistia is now part of modern-day Israel, which contains the red fox, Blandford's fox, and Ruppel's fox. During the life of Samson, we may have also been able to find Arctic foxes, since the Ice Age happened between the events of Judges and Noah's flood, at least according to answers in Genesis.
The Ice Age was generated by the flood. In other words, those who believe in evolution actually believe
I'm
in
sorry,
ice
so
ages.
your claim is that there was an ice age 4,000 years ago? What makes you think this was 4,000 years ago?
What makes us think that that was 4,000 years ago? Well, first of all, we take the chronology in the Bible, and that chronology in the Bible is that Noah's flood was about 4,300 years ago, and so that gives us a date at the end of the flood. Then we look at the evidence that we have today of the fact that we know that there was ice in the past, we know there were glaciers in the past that advanced, because we see the evidence in the present.
Noah's Ark brings up another very interesting point, which is that over the course of about 1,200 years, foxes were able to rapidly evolve and mass reproduce from one pair of canid ancestors, alongside domestic dogs, wolves, coyotes, jackals, dingoes, dholes, colpio, bush dogs, raccoon dogs, and African wild dogs, in addition to about 200 collective subspecies. It's funny that creationists reject evolution unless it becomes necessary to explain away plot holes in their fairy tale. But we'll save Noah's Ark for another video. When the Philistines asked, "Who did this?" they were told, "Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion." So the Philistines went and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Edom. Revenge for what? The Philistines did nothing wrong. His father-in-law was the one that gave his wife away to somebody else after she tricked him because his wedding guests threatened to murder her. Samson says, "I merely did to them what they did to me," and then proceeded to murder another 1,000 Philistines with a donkey jawbone.
Come on!
The apologetics surrounding Samson and 300 foxes is very pathetic and almost non-existent. Here's a website called Defending Inerrancy, and they say the solution to the problem is, it must be remembered that Samson was endowed with supernatural strength. Although the passage does not describe how Samson was able to capture so many foxes, it is not difficult to see that a man who could use the jawbone of an ass to kill 1,000 warriors would have little problem capturing 300 foxes. See, they're not actually answering the question, they're just shrugging it off, like, if he can do this, then he can do that. The difference is, with the 1,000 warriors, these men are actively just coming towards Samson. All he has to do is stand there with the jawbone and swing it around killing people. With the foxes, Samson had to go out, hunt, capture, and contain all these foxes over the course of weeks or months, just to burn down a field that he could have done by himself. That's what makes the story ridiculous. North Heights Church of Christ says this about the story. Samson's actions were not done from any sense of godly justice. This was sinful vengeance. And as it always does, it begets more vengeance. Where do they get this idea that these killings were sins? Because that's not what the text says. God continues to grant Samson his strength through his entire life, only ever intervening in order to give Samson a fresh drink of water whenever he's thirsty. Not only that, he rewards Samson by making him leader of the Israelites for 20 years. Samson only ever loses his strength when his luscious locks get lopped off. But not for long, because God grants his strength back one last time so that he can do a mass murder-suicide Columbine on a whole bunch more Philistines. It says Samson killed more Philistines in his death than in his entire life. So not only did God never correct his behavior, he completely enables and rewards him for it. Remember, God was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. It was all part of his plan for those fields to burn and thousands of innocent people to starve to death. The ones that he didn't have Samson murder, of course. Hence why God rewards Samson with drinking water and by making him ruler of the Israelites for 20 years. So God put the Israelites under the rule of the Philistines as a punishment for doing evil. And then God uses Samson to murder the Philistines as a punishment for ruling over the Israelites? You just can't please this God. He can't make up his own mind. And you know, for a God who supposedly loves all his children, he sure does love picking favorites. It's also worth mentioning that this God is not opposed to slavery, as long as it's the Israelites owning foreigners as slaves. When the Israelites are slaves, it's a different story. When I was a kid, I used to draw these little paper books with Bible stories, and I'd illustrate them and write them myself. And I did creation, Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, and my fourth installment was going to be the life of Samson. And as I was reading through the source material, I came across the passage about the 300 foxes getting lit on fire. And even as a 10-year-old kid, I recognized how completely ridiculous the whole story is. And that was really the first seed of doubt that I ever had towards Christianity. But I really wish somebody back then would have told me that it's okay to question your beliefs, because the truth has nothing to fear from investigation. See you next time, guys.